Hello, everyone. Good morning in Asia Pacific. Good evening or hello in the rest of the world, where you're watching live or recorded. We're really excited to kick off our 2025 Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We're very excited here, and we have a really amazing team for the session of today. I want to introduce you here the Brickfield Education Labs team. Probably this man needs no introduction for many of us, especially who's been many years in the Google sphere, in the Moodle sphere space of open source technology and accessibility, Gavin Henrik. Gavin has been since 2019 leading Brickfield Education Labs. He is really the authority. I don't know somebody who is more knowledgeable and more passionate about this topic. So this is really exciting for me. And here is Kara Conger from the Brickfield team. So hello, guys. How are you today?
Hello, Chris.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, we're delighted to be here today.
Great. So yeah, before we get started and while people join us, we invite you to scan this QR code. That way you will be able to access closed captions of the session and you can follow along. This is like a very special masterclass. Please leave your questions throughout the session. We'll be happy to answer them. Any comments? We hope to have like a lively conversation about this topic, which is like really important, at least for everyone who is joining us here. We are sharing the link. If you are connected to LinkedIn or to YouTube, you can check out the link, which I have shared below. And without further ado, Gavin, I think we can get started.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you very much. And just for those who are watching a recording, that link won't work. So this is just using Present Live to allow people to have real-time translation and access to the transcript and the slides as we go through the presentation. So for those who are here, enjoy. So, let's go back one. So this session is all about understanding what your accessibility rating is. And what does that mean? Well, how do you rate your accessibility? When you think about what you do in your day-to-day practice, are you doing images well? Are you doing layout well? Is it accessibility the first thing you think about when creating content? Or is it one of those things that's like, oops, we finished the project, we should really do accessibility, but there's no budget? Obviously, accessibility needs to be baked in. It needs to be part of the recipe of every project at the beginning, just like we are both using YouTube, which can generate captions, and in this case, Present Live for captions, transcript, and translations. We're making conscious decisions to make things accessible. So this is going to go through, we've got 18 behaviors based on our accessibility tip cube and zine, which we'll share the links later to. But let's go through these now. We're going to go through them at a reasonable pace. So if you have any questions, of course, do feel free to chip in. And I'm sure Chris will pull it out of YouTube to bring up. So let's have a first one. Well, the first one is alt text for images. So when you think about images, you look at this image on the right, and here's two potential alternative texts. And what it is for someone who can't see it, this is a text description of that image. However, the really important thing here is an image doesn't have one description. That might seem a little bit odd. Well, it's all about the context. And in this case, maybe if you're just talking about this lovely tree, there was a photograph one of my team took when they were in Valencia at a Moodle conference there recently. And it could have been going, hey, here is an orange tree with some bright fruit. It contrasts against the lovely green leaves and a clear blue sky. However, it could be something that the context is more that this tree is part of a big orchard. The leaves, they're not just green, but they're full, they're lush, and the bright, ripe oranges, etc. So it really depends about the depth of description and the context and when you use it. There could also just be a context of there is a tree in an orchard, where the type of tree and the weather doesn't actually matter in the description. So image alt text is all about the description in the context in which you're using the image. Really important. So
Context.
Another key thing about images is the resolution and the contrast. But let's think about the resolution. So here you have two images. On the left-hand side, you have this lovely corridor. It was in one of the technical institutions in Milan, where I was lucky to be there about a month or so ago. And you can see the crispness in the shadows, in the design of the tiles, and in the walls on either side, and the whole way back to the end of it. It's a real crisp, clear, and you'd be able to zoom in if you had this on your webpage. On the right, it's a bit more fuzzy. You can even see, especially at the back of the corridor, it's really lost definition. So if I was to zoom in on that image, I wouldn't be able to get the same level of clarity and inspiration from what was a beautiful, beautiful building. However, this is really important because often people think that accessibility is, oh, it's to help people with disabilities. Yes, it is. Of course it is. However, sometimes if people are seeing something and have to be able to see detail, then the image must be a good quality and good resolution for the purpose that it is for. Another big thing, some people love using text on images. Now, on the left-hand side, we have an example there of a white image with some words on an image or in an image. And then I've made the image bigger and the words stay in the same way. Problem is, these are images and they're not usable by screen readers, or if Edge tried to read this or Siri, it's just an image. But it's also on the right. If I was trying to make the text really bigger and make it look better for on my phone device and zooming in, here, this was just a text box with some text in it. And then when I made the font bigger, it then changed and repositioned itself. It became responsive and adaptive to the type of space it had. But that's readable by screen readers and so on, where the ones on the left aren't. They might still look cool, but they're not really usable. So as a general rule, don't use text only images. And if you do have to, make sure that the alt text is the text on the image. That's the easiest alt text you will ever write. Oops. There. Use of headings. So often I see this kind of assignment description where it's a paragraph of sentences describing what someone should do in assignment. Now, my journalist and PR lecturer from 28 years ago, I'm getting old, but from 28 years ago, would have said, I'm burying the lead here, which means that there's some really important information at the end of the paragraph. That's true. However, if you just add headings in and structure this in a meaningful way, this makes it readable and more digestible by everybody. You can now clearly see there's an overview, there's a format, then some important points, including naming of the file, where if we go back to the previous slide, you'll see that spell checking and naming the file is sort of added in there at the end. And the problem is, when people are reading a paragraph like this, they'll read through it until they think they know what they need to do, and off they go. I do that. I'm quite sure if everyone here had to be able to say they probably have done that the same. Structure it well, use headings, but not just any headings, meaningful headings, ones that are ideally on a page that are unique. But when people look at them, they're just scanning through the headings to find the part that they want. They don't just want notes. So instead of important, if that was just notes, well, maybe it's just some extra notes. But important means that it's meaningful. The format is meaningful rather than technical requirements or project overview. So thinking about meaningful headings, really, really important. Of course, then the last part with layout, and these are the 3 tips around layout, is about using bullet point lists. If you have a list of stuff, make it a list. Nothing wrong with a list. And make it technically a list and make it look like a list. Often people fake lists. I know that might seem silly, but they literally fake lists with little images and text beside it, which doesn't work like a list for someone who's using a screen reader. And if you are using sort of keyboard navigation through it, it won't tell you it's a list. It's just sentences or mini paragraphs one after the other. So use lists to structure information when you have a list of things to say. Number them if they are numerically important, but make a list. Don't fake it, make it. And yes, my jokes don't get any better than that. I'm really sorry. I do promise that in this session you'll either laugh with me or at me, or both. This awesome slide here is great. So here we have basically the same text or the same information being shared twice. In the first one, there's a click here link. Now, here's a problem, and I know this might get a little bit metaphysical for a second, but take a deep breath, a glass of wine, tea, or whatever you drink. So I'm reading this, and I go to click here. I need to actually click here, go there, figure out where it's going to decide if I actually want to click here or there in the first place. Now, I know that might get a little bit confusing, and it is, because if I read stuff around it and still don't know where it's supposed to go to, I then have to go there to find out where it's going. That wouldn't be very good if you had to drive to somewhere to know where it was. However, if you look at the second sentence, you've got the link as being newsletter. Now, you will assume that with links, the way links work is if you select that, you're going to go to the newsletter. And it's really that simple. This isn't rocket science. Don't try and confuse people. Don't try and be clever. Just tell them where they're going. Can you imagine a signpost in the middle of a crossroads, in a road, and all the signs just were blank, pointing in directions or somewhere X number of miles or kilometers or however you measure distance? Not a good thing. But equally, you don't want to do that with, in this case, a full URL as well. And why wouldn't you? Because when I look at that, I don't know. I know it's a Google Doc, but that's about it. I know it's a form, but yeah, I don't know what it's a form for. If I read a bit above, it goes, you can subscribe for the newsletter. So one, it's slowing me down if I'm scanning through a page and I see this. I have to read the stuff around it to know where it's going, or again, click on it to find out where it did go. But down below it, I have, you can subscribe to our newsletter. Subscribe to our newsletter. It's a call to action. I wonder what will happen when I click that link. Yes, it's going to help me subscribe to the newsletter. That's it. This is not rocket science. It's something that's straightforward. But if you also have the first one, a screen reader will literally read this out. It would go link https://docs.google.com/form/d/e/1f. I won't continue, but they would have to listen to it all, and by the end of it, they still wouldn't know where it went. So please, for people who use assistive technology, and for the rest of us, make your links meaningful. Tell us where they're going. Tell us what you're doing. You know, it's an interesting one. People like hiding links. They like being cool. Get a designer, bring them into a web page, and if they're a good designer, stuff will look like it should. But not everyone has the knowledge. So in that first one there's actually a link in that first row that you can subscribe to our newsletter, except the link doesn't have an underline or italics or bold or a color or anything. In fact, it has a mouse over. Here's the thing. You can't mouse over on a tablet or a phone, which 80% use for accessing the web content. And guess what? You can't mouse over when you're on a video stream either. Isn't that weird? But then the next one, okay, it just has an underline. So that's better than nothing, but still it's not enough. Usually you want two attributes. And the next one you can see, subscribe to our newsletter, it's italics. Italics is usually meant for something else. It's meant for emphasis. So not great to do that. And then the last one, you can subscribe to our newsletter. People often use bold for a different purpose. So here's possibly not the best place. And the standard you'll see is a color with an underline. And that's just something different. And it should be significantly different from the rest. So it could have been bold with an underline or and so on. So it's just two different changes from the standard text. Links should look like links. Now, obviously with YouTube or LinkedIn and with our different tools, you can have closed captions, and closed captions are great. And there's nearly 80% of people are using closed captions, whether they're watching a TV in a busy, loud bar, not suggesting you go to a bar, or maybe they're watching it in a quiet library. if you have media, if you've audio or caption or video, having captions available for real time text version is really important for people. So please do. However, captions isn't everything, because have you ever tried to print a video? You need transcripts. A transcript is the full text alternative for the video. Now, transcripts help everybody, whether they're deaf, whether they're hard of hearing, cognitive learning disabilities. You can print it. You don't have to print your video, you print the transcript, you open it in assistive technology, or open it in like Microsoft Word and use Immersive Reader with it. They're really good for people to annotate. Have you ever tried to add notes to a video that you're watching on YouTube? One, you'd run out of space on your monitor. Not that anyone should do that. And please don't. Anyone who has written on their monitor with a permanent ink, not my fault. But if you were also learning in a second language, having that transcript helps you, because you can then use auto to translate back and forward. And that last part there isn't about SEO, just online in the web. So big search engines like Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, kind of stuff. In LMSs, if you don't have the text of the video or even a good abstract of the video, the search engines can't find it. It's just an embedded media file, nothing else. So all those videos that you've got in your LMS, if someone searches for them, they're not finding them. So add a transcript, or or if in the video platform it has a transcript, at least add a good abstract for your video, or people will not find them. And this is another one. Oh, please just stop. I just beg you. I was working on with a client, and they had a course with 11 videos on the course page. This is not a good thing in the best of times. However, they all were autoplay, and they all loaded at slightly different times. And it meant that you had basically going, hey, welcome to the, hey, welcome to the, hey, welcome to the, 11 times as they all played over each other. Autoplay is bad. Agency to the learner. And I don't mean job agency, I mean give them control. Give control to the person who's listening. Just like with Present Live, you can choose what language you listen to. And the same, you can choose whether you're reading the captions or not. Agency and control to the person listening and consuming the content, please. Always. This one, well, here, incoming joke. If you haven't heard my joke about tables, you're about to have it now, and well, you'll never look at your sitting room the same. So here we have an extract from a table in an image here, and in one of the sections, you've got two columns, cells, they've been merged, so it's making it more complicated to navigate, and then someone's put a table of 4 cells into that merged cell. Don't know why, but these kind of things happen sometimes where people want to group data together. They don't really know how to use tables very well. This is called a nested table. Now, nested tables are a really useful thing in your sitting room. If you can imagine those tables that you have a big one and a small one under it and a small one under it. So that's the only place you should ever use nested tables, in your sitting room. Don't use nested tables on the web. It's a no-no. So if you want nested tables, go to Amazon and buy them. Don't put them on your website. However, another thing is, tables should look, I won't say pretty, because I won't claim this being pretty, but they should. But also, headings should be defined. Headings should look like headings. Links should look like links. You know, there's a pattern here. So when you've got a table, if you define them as headings, often you can then style them nicely. So here we have a nice green background with some white text for the headings here of company, contact, and country. That's awesome. Table has data in it, that's good too, but your headings here are clearly defined, and then you can style them that they look like headings. This one also, by the way, also has the zebra effect, where it's a light gray background with white alternating. That's really good too. Zebras, yeah, generally they're good in the wild, or on zebra stripes, yeah, they're good on your table. Told you the jokes don't get better. However, this one's really important. On the left here, you have an image basically showing someone trying to use a table for layout for a page, a web page, with a row for header, another row for navigation, and the next row has an aside and 2 sections, and a footer at the bottom. There's ways you can do that without using tables. However, people do it for tables. And on the right, you have a table with data. So it's a no for the left and a yes for the right. Please use data in tables and layout, learn how to web design, or get somebody else. When it comes to text, oh, this is a really interesting one. You really do have to use plain, simple language. Now, you don't have to have too simple. I mean, if it's a complicated subject, you're going to have terminology, you're going to have phrases, you're going to have acronyms. Accessibility certainly has its own share of acronyms, with WCAG for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or POUR, Perceivable, Operable, Understandable, and Robust. Didn't use any of them up to now because I just like using plain language, and accessibility is often positioned from a content creator point of view as just content done better. So here it's good to have good plain language that people can follow. Really important. Don't make it complicated, but the one thing here, keeping it simple means one topic per paragraph. Don't try and overload people. However, this is what people do a lot. So here we have the same paragraph. Now it's all capital letters. Now, what's this instantly done? It's made it slower for everyone to read. And there's a few reasons for that. One, there seems to be less space between all the words, which there is because they're now rectangular shaped. So you could draw a little box around every one of these words. So they're all caps. They've lost their shape. The space seems to be less, so they're harder to read. However, they're much harder to read for people, for example, with dyslexia, who rely on the shape. If we go back here, you can see like the word presentation at the bottom at the beginning. It has a little bit that goes down, then it's the whole way horizontal across. And as you go up around the N, it goes up at the I and the T and that back down again. Then it goes up at the T and down again, and so on. So it's shapes. And for often people who have dyslexia will memorize the shapes of words to be able to read more quickly. This stops them. So 10% of the world have dyslexia. Please don't use capitals like this. Even a full sentence of capitals can make it significantly harder for people. So please include people. Sentence case. And so that's that. Sorry. Let's talk about color. So here we have a slide with a number of bits of words colored. We've create a presentation is in red and the word project is in red. Below that, you've got slides in a blue. You've intro and outcomes in a green. And then over on the left, method and PowerPoint are in purple and sections is in blue. Now, people who are colorblind, there's different types of colorblind. It's about 1 in 10 men are and about 1 in 200 women are. And there was an example of a lecturer who I met who, well, they were presenting at, they were teaching web design, and they were in their, I think, mid-20s, and they'd been a lecturer for a while, and they were talking about how the blues and greens on the design that they had put together work really well together. And a student puts up their hand and go, hey there, there's no green. There's no green on the page at all. Because they just didn't see it the same way. Or maybe there was no blue. But the point was that someone in their 20s didn't know that they were colorblind until it happened to come up. So people may or may not know that they have a disability. So you need to assume that everybody does and work within reducing those barriers, because if someone is full red colorblind, suddenly those reds and greens look very similar. The same in the blues and purples. You don't want to have that. Now, there are different types of color blindness or color deficiency. So please consider that to not use color alone. So if you want to highlight a word, you might use color and make it bold. So that would be a good way to be able to highlight them so that they can see them differently. Another aspect of that is color contrast. So when we think about color contrast, it's the darkness and the light, whether it's in the case of a dark text on a light background or vice versa. You need to have some color contrast to be able to make it readable. And if you have it too bright, like a pure white background with black text on it, sometimes then if it's a really bright room or out in the sunshine, it might be harder to read. And if the contrast isn't enough, even if you're in a bright room, it's the contrast isn't good enough. So check this. All of the things like PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, and so on, they all have checkers for this kind of thing, and they'll recommend when something needs to be fixed. Now, Brickfield, obviously, Chris introduced where we are. So all of these tips are things that we discuss within our training courses and our consulting when we work with clients. So part of the stuff that we do at Brickfield is we work with clients to help audit their courses and look at their Moodle or other websites to see what challenges are there and what improvements can be made. We have a toolkit that sits inside of OpenLMS and Moodle to be able to analyze the content and identify issues and also help people fix it. We also have trainings. We have 4 training modules: general accessibility foundations, web accessibility, media accessibility, and document accessibility. Because accessible documents don't happen by accident. If you're not trained how to create a proper Word document, when I learned to be an IT teacher, I had to do a project of a curriculum teaching Microsoft Word. I think it was around 3 weeks of a curriculum to learn Microsoft Word. People don't spend 3 minutes learning Microsoft Word now. They look at a YouTube, figure out what they need, and get on with it. So they don't know all the basics. You need to have the basics. We also then have some extra features that work with Moodle. So for example, or OpenLMS, for example, some course management bundles to help manage enrollments as teachers and give extra control to teachers running a course. We work a lot with incompetencies and skills and badging and recognition. The tool that you're self-assessing on our GAAD.blabs.ie site is all using Compass Plus, one of our tools. And then we have an assessment bundle support with more accessible assessments. And in everything we do in accessibility, we have this philosophy of find, fix, and future-proof. It isn't just about finding it and making sure that you found all the errors and then fixing them. On the right, you need to future-proof because you don't want these errors coming back. So you need training, you need capacity building, you need alternate formats and universal design for learning. So enough from me then. So have we any questions? Or Cara, what's your thoughts?
So, I mean, for me, when we use Brickfield, one of the great things about it is a teaching tool alongside being an accessibility checker. So the opportunity to learn more about accessibility as you use it and become a better user and a better teacher, essentially, over time is what makes it so great.
I have a couple of thoughts and some questions from the team here. But I want to go back a little bit to the beginning when you mentioned it's common to think of accessibility kind of an afterthought. And in many cases, some people say, oh, there's plenty of tools, there's AI now that can sort of turn things accessible. And before AI, there was these things, the overlays, right? Where you just, people think, oh, I can just install a plugin, I will turn everything accessible. I think I have an idea of the answer, but I'd like to know, like from your vantage point, why is it a mistake to think of accessibility as an afterthought in the design?
Well, because how you go about doing it can impact the technical. So there's a phrase that remediation, which is fixing, is rework, doing stuff again. Rework is waste. So if you have to go back and fix things, you're wasting time, you're wasting money, you're wasting your resources and your momentum. So if you bake it in at the beginning, then it's just part of the way you work. It's like the fact that we chose to use Present Live and you're using a system like on YouTube, which will have captions. These are choices that you've made. They don't create extra work after the fact, although we will go back and correct the spell checking on the captions, of course. However, that's just helping everyone. So it's just a way of working. But people often, they don't know the why. They don't know what the impact is. And that's why we do these kind of sessions to show that, there's a lot of small things there. There's 18 behaviors, which if you do, you will make the world, your learning, a better place.
Yeah. I think something that I want to kind of acknowledge from you, from Brickfield, is I think that just like this concern for a good experience for everyone kind of invites you to be more playful, like in a good sense of the word. Because I've seen the tools that you do. Like, I don't know if people have seen Brickfield at conferences, how you have like these cubes that are like really fun. And I think one takeaway that I get from accessibility and from caring about the topic is that it kind of challenge you maybe to be more inventive in the way you present information and to make sure that people are actually getting what you are sharing. And
Yeah.
I just think it's funny because I like at my university, I think none of my teachers had any training on that, and it was everything like just so dry.
Well, yeah. Well, we see a lot of that. We see a lot of lecturers who come and go, we really want to do something here, but we don't know where to start. And accessibility is a journey from wherever you are now to a more inclusive world or a more inclusive learning course. And these are things, this might take a few years for you to go through and make improvements over time. But every journey starts with the first step. So taking training, coming on this webinar, these are steps. Using our toolkit, that's another step.
Exactly. Yeah. I
So,
hope
Karen,
some of my teachers are watching this.
yeah.
And there's another kind of topic I think is kind of relevant nowadays, and it has to do with, can you mention a little bit when it comes to like design and designers who want to kind of create these really amazing things, or well, within quotes maybe,
Yeah.
whereas there kind of, I don't know if there is like this what's the word, like a conflict between a designer wanting to do something really neat and bright and flashy, I guess something that's actually useful and that does the job, especially when it comes to learning experiences.
Yeah. So designers are usually really wanting to do a great job. And for example, readability, once a designer learns about it, so understanding color contrast, font, sizes, alignment, like using left alignment, not centered, or right alignment, or full justification. Once they understand the impact of these, then because they want to do a good job. We worked with some graphic designers at the very beginning of Brickfield to help with our design and our logo. And for those who want to know, our logo is a representation of Sandymount Green in Dublin, which is a triangle, and each of the little breakups in our logo, the lines across it, are the footpaths on it. But that was a graphic designer thinking about our product. But also, now when that graphic designer is working with others, they're able to take all the learnings they've had about accessibility and talk to them. And when the designer goes, hey, I want to have this color with that color, and they'll go, well, actually, you need better color contrast to ensure that it's being read. The font needs to be this big on your poster so it can be seen from a distance and not too far away. Or you want all those centered aligned? Well, if we put them left aligned, people who are dyslexic will also be able to read those. And that's 10% of the population, or 40% of self-made millionaires. So if you're targeting self-made millionaires in your marketing, make sure that you include dyslexic supported design principles in what you're doing. Now,
Right.
actually, just saw a question there from Julia.
Yeah, I was
So,
about to bring it up. Any questions, please let us know. But this one is from Julia Avenel. So
okay.
I had a staff member ask where they can see a screen reader in action and to see how it works. Do you have any recommendations, examples of screen readers?
So I think every institution or every organization should try and have at least one of their IT team or design team being able to use a screen reader. There are plenty of YouTube videos on it, and everyone who's registered, we can send you on one or two examples. There's JAWS, which is a typical screen
Yes,
reader,
yeah.
or there's also NVDA. NVDA is a free Windows-based one, and they all take a little bit of time to use. But once you learn and understand them a little bit, that can really help. But that doesn't change from seeing someone who relies on it using it, because they use it slightly differently. You can learn how to use it, but they live through it. They operate through that screen reader. So you want to see someone who is blind using a screen reader to fully understand the the way they have to experience the content. And so there are some good YouTube videos on that. But look in your institution, I'm quite sure you have some students with disabilities. There's a phrase about nothing for us without us. Include people with disabilities when you're having to train your staff. So
Yeah, right. I remember when I was at the university, I was in the theater club, and I had to play a part of a blind person. And in my university, there was in the library, there was like a visual aid room where they have tools for people who are kind of trying to read, like using braille and so on. And the person who was leading, he was blind. And I was just talking to him, and he told me about so many things, like the way he sees the world, even just the way you work a cane just to walk. There's like a special technique, and he allowed me to do the exercise where I had to just close my eyes for a while and just try to pretty much sense the environment just with it may have a better name than the stick that they use, or the cane. But it's really eye-opening. Like, people definitely see the world in very different ways. I also wanted to mention that you were talking about like the web design part, and I remember like way at the beginning of web design, people found that using tables, like HTML tables, were kind of a way to lay out your content in some ways before we were concerned about like responsive design, how a website would look on a mobile phone and so on. And we do have these many sizes of screens. But I think it's important to recognize that as technology evolves, the standards have evolved as well. And that's why the HTML and that thing that you showed of the layout of a website, it's I think there's a word for it, where kind of the code for that element in HTML, in CSS, corresponds to what it actually is, and that makes it much easier for readers and other tools to kind of guide the user, right?
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's I do think that the web has come on a long way, and people are used to frames, and whether they're using Bootstrap or other aspects for their design. You can't get away from it. If you want to do web design, you have to learn HTML and CSS. It's like if you're going to build a house, you probably are going to learn to use bricks and mortar. The bricks and mortar for the web is HTML and CSS and JavaScript. But
yeah, right. And do you have any thoughts on kind of the state of the standards, of the accessibility standards, like WCAG? And I know there's several. They've obviously evolved. Do you have any thoughts on how they are right now? Is there work to do? How would you consider them?
well, the guidelines rather than standards. There are standards like ISO, but the WCAG, they're basically a curated set of guidelines from the community. All of the people with experience and understanding, whether they're people with disabilities, people who work with disabilities, and specialists, and so on, they curate these over time, and they keep on improving them, and they discuss them. And the increase in recognition of the cognitive aspect is really, really important. Don't underrate the cognitive impact, whether it's cognitive load that's being generated because there's so much on the screen and people are on the web page and people are trying to understand it all. I think that's really, really key. So one of the things, by the way, so Kara's just dropped in the tips link there. So we talked earlier about a cube. So these are printable work aids. They're not supposed to be accessible PDFs. They're supposed to be printed. And they basically then create them as a zine. There's a few languages in there for people. I think it's English, Italian, Spanish, and another one as well that you can download and print them out. And these are just ways of having a work aid, something that you can have. Those 18 tips from this presentation that you can have them in your pocket for you. So, yeah, I think it's just really key nowadays, with these guidelines, and that's like a mini set of guidelines. Those 18 things. Is that enough? Of course it's not, but that's a start.
Absolutely.
And so, for example, some of our clients but buy a few hundred of the cubes, which is the three-dimensional version, and sit them on their lecturer's desk as reminders, so that they can pick them up and just use them as a reminder the whole time. So yeah, cubes are awesome.
Yeah, and you love cubes and other geometric shapes, as do
Yeah.
I. Well, all right. And I think what you mentioned is a great way to kind of give it an end to this session for now. It is a journey. We're all in it at some stages. We're all moving forward together. And that's why I think the community is really important here. We will be sharing a recording of this session, the resources that we mentioned, some other tools. I really hope that you can follow us, follow Brickfield, connect with us on YouTube, on LinkedIn, wherever you dwell. And other than that, I just want to thank you guys. Thank you so much for this session today, and for kicking off this Accessibility Day. So thank you everyone who is joining us today, and we'll see you around.
Sláinte. Bye-bye.